her. That's what I figured.
So you want y'all to do the same thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he came and told me. They gave me this.
You could have done that before. You want to do what I said about?
I want to do what I was asked to do.
Okay.
Nothing more.
Okay. You did, black people? Tell them again. I can't talk about that.
Okay, guys, we need to sit down. We're getting started. We are live on YouTube.
Good afternoon. Welcome to New Bethel, Lexington. We have a very special occasion, a book signing of mine, Monticello, by one from the soil, JOCELYN, NICOLE Johnson. And it's an honor to have her here. And once again, greetings from Pastor Eskew and the New Bethel Church family and the Lexington family. All right.
All right, we will have the introduction of our author by Ayanna Ishmael.
Welcome, everyone. I am Ayanna Ishmael. I want to thank you all for coming here today to talk about JOCELYN Johnson's My Monticello. I am happy to be introducing the lovely author today. My cousin JOCELYN is the daughter of my uncle Michael and my aunt Bert Johnson, both lifelong Bethel AME congregants and graduates of Allen University. My Monticello is JOCELYN's debut book of fiction that was called A Masterly Feat by the New York Times and featured on Good Morning America last fall. Listed as the #3 on Time Magazine's Best Books of 2021, My Monticello was also a winner of the Weatherford Award, the Lillian Smith Award, and was a finalist for many others, including the LA Times Awards. One story in JOCELYN's collection, Control Negro, was anthologized in the Best American Short Stories and read live by American actor and television host LeVar Burton. The novella for which the collection is named is being adapted into a film for Netflix. JOCELYN has worked as an art teacher for 20 years in public school and currently lives in Charlottesville, Virginia. I would like you all to put your hands together and welcome JOCELYN NICOLE Johnson.
Can you hear me now? Wonderful. First of all, I just want to say good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to start with gratitude. I'm really thankful to be here for our week in Lexington in South Carolina. We came for our family cookout, and to be here in this sanctuary where I spent so much time as a child with my aunties, uncles. Today, this morning in service, I saw so many familiar faces just from childhood, people that I recognized. I've been here in pastels for Easter. I've been here in black for funerals. I've been here, one time, I don't know how it happened, I came up to the pulpit and I ended up in the back and I came out in a robe. And I was just swinging. I can't sing, but I was up there for a little bit. So I have all these memories of this space and it's really nice to be here. I also really want to thank everyone who made this event possible. Reverend Eskew did a lot to make it possible, as well as the Eskew family, Jeremiah and Tara and Kayla as well. I also want to thank my cousin, Linda Davis, who also is doing a lot to help us here with this. Ayanna, who you just heard, who look out for her, Teen Vogue, and doing amazing things. So I was really grateful to have her here to introduce me. And mostly, I really just want to thank you all for taking time on a Sunday. You could be relaxing at home to come out and be here for those people who are listening. I really appreciate any care that you have towards looking at this book, taking time, paying attention, saying congratulations, telling my parents who are over the moon, congratulations. So I really appreciate all that. For the next maybe 20 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about this book I wrote, My Monticello. It's a collection of short stories. It's 5 stories and a long novella, almost like a short novel, that I wrote between 2015 and 2020 while I was teaching full-time public school in Charlottesville, Virginia, and in Virginia. I'm going to read a short section from several of the stories, just a minute or two, to give you a feel for what they sound like. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the ideas and the inspirations that got me thinking about this book and writing this book over that time. As a side note, I debuted this book at age 50 in 2021, but I've been working to be a writer for a long time, about 20 years. So I've been working by going to workshops, by being in writer groups, by getting an agent, having a book and not selling, all these kind of near misses and things. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that part of it, but if you have any questions about being a writer, pursuing art, anything about that, I'm happy to talk about it. Last but not least, just general questions. If you have any general questions, I would love to hear that. I always think it's nice to hear what people are interested in and be able to talk about that. And if anyone didn't get a book signed, I'm happy to do that after. We had it before instead of after, but we're still available if you want a book signed or if you would like to buy a book at the end. So I'm gonna start with part 1, Virginia is Not Your Home. So Virginia is Not Your Home is the second story in the collection. It used to be the title of the whole collection. To set it up, it's the story of a girl. Her name is Virginia. She's born in a rural part of Virginia, but she wishes she was from elsewhere. She reads this book in French, and she's learning French in high school, and she wishes she could be, from this other place. She has this fantasy of changing her name. So I'm just going to read the very first paragraph of that story. Virginia is not your home. They hung that name on you at birth, but Virginia was never your home. Read Nausea by Sartre and give yourself a new one. Trumpet your new name from the liver-spotted washroom mirror like a coronation. Gape your mouth, then angle your tongue behind your teeth. While you're at it, work to remedy those other afflictions, that fetid high hill R that has planted itself in the middle of words like wash. Scrub the stink of manure from your clothing, and while your young body churns over the basin, keep whispering your new, still secret name. Believe that if you can just change this, you can change everything. So this story is fiction. I'm not like this girl. I wasn't born where she is. My biography is not hers. But I share something with this character. I share this kind of complicated idea of home. As many of you know, of my immediate family, everyone else was born here in South Carolina or in Lexington, and I alone was born in Virginia, in Northern Virginia. So as a child, it felt like every other weekend we drove 10 hours in the car with pillows stacked to the roof where you could barely move, with Motown, Mom's Tunes in the tape player, back home here to South Carolina, where I would see my grandmother, my Pansy, where we have family reunions, we'd have, just like we just had, I would see my girl cousins who were older and very glamorous, and we would walk barefoot in the sand and eat bullets. I still don't know what bullets are, but I ate them as a child. And they would teach me the newest dance and say, why are you you're like us and you're not like us, right? There was this question. You're part of us, but you're also from somewhere else. It was kind of this complicated idea of home. And then I would drive back home 10 hours to Virginia and face similar questions from externally and from myself. This idea of a complicated idea of home is part of a lot of the stories. It's part of this story and it's part of the whole collection. Not only in relation to state, right? I'm from Virginia, but also in relation to country, right? So we're thinking about this 4th of July weekend. What are the ways in which I feel at home in this country of mine and that I'm made to feel at home in this country of mine? And what are the ways in which I don't feel at home or which I feel excluded as a Black person, as a woman, as an artist, as my own nerdy self, as myself, right? So what are those ways? Part 2, Control Negro. Next, I'm gonna read from a different story, just again, a paragraph or two, a minute or two. This is my dad's favorite story. It's a story of a professor, Cornelius Adams. He grew up here in South Carolina, but he ends up being a professor in Virginia. As a side note, to create the childhood of this character, I thought again about here, especially the lives of my parents, how I imagine the stories around the lives of my parents. Because of that, I have all these little notes in the story that reflect back to here. I have a place, the Sandhills. I have White Knoll, which was a school my parents mentioned. I talk about something my mom talked about, which was Black schools during segregation or Black groups inheriting uniforms that were used already by white teams or so forth. I have echoes of my uncles coming back from Vietnam, this image of men coming back to Vietnam to a community. So all those things kind of are part of the story. To set it up, the part I'm gonna read, this story is in a letter form. So this father is writing a letter to his son and he's confessing, actually, I'm your real father. The son doesn't know it, his grown son. And also, by the way, I've been conducting this secret experiment where I've been comparing you, trying to tell you to be twice as good and perfect, and comparing you to these white male students I have, to test America's promise. If you do the right things, will you get the same outcome? I'm gonna read from really early in the story, after the professor, Cornelius, tells his son how he was mistaken for a janitor in his office at the university where he works. And then he's explaining kind of this experiment and how it came to him. So I'm just gonna read a couple paragraphs. Control Negro. It's nothing, I told myself, as I walked back to my apartment that evening, though in truth I felt tired. What does it matter, I remember thinking? What does it matter how much I achieve, or how clearly I speak, or how carefully I conduct myself, if the brutal misjudgments remain regardless? What if, even here, they cannot bring themselves to see me and instead see something oblique where I thought I stood? Mother used to tell me, work hard, Cornelius, work twice as hard and you can have something. But there I was, a grown man, wondering what it was I could have and what would be forever withheld. What I needed, it occurred to me then, was to watch another man's life unfold, a Black boy, not unlike me, but better than me, an African American who was otherwise equivalent to those broods of average American Caucasian males who scudded through my classrooms. ACMs, I came to call them. And I wondered how they would measure up with this flawless young man as a watermark. No, it wasn't them exactly. I wanted to test my own beloved country. Given the right conditions, could America extend her promise of life and liberty to me too, to someone like me? What I needed was a control Negro. And given what I teach, it wasn't lost on me, the agitation of those two words linked together, that archaic descriptor clanking off the end like a rusted shackle. Those words struck in me, and from them you grew. I chose this story because, A, we're heading into the 4th of July weekend and we're thinking about life and liberty, but also because the story, as well as being about home, this professor wanting to feel at home in his country, it's also a story of history, right? What happened in the past, the echoes of the past, of cause and effect. We have this father who's desperate to kind of overcome this racist violence of his past through this experiment with his son. The story also asks if, as we parent children in a world that has any sort of violence or judgment directed towards them, black and brown children, immigrant children, girl children, is asking them to hide parts of themselves, is asking them to be twice as good at its own kind of injury. Part 3, the last story I'm going to read a little bit from, is called My Monticello. That's the novella, that's the biggest part of the book. It's the last part of the book. I wrote it in 2018 to 2019, before the pandemic, and it's a near future story of a girl named Denasia Love. She's a college student at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, where I live, and she's a hometown girl. That's her hometown. In this story, there's a near future time of unraveling. We've got some of the things we actually see today. We have infrastructure crumbling, we've got environmental pressures, but it's exaggerated. And her and her neighbors, their neighborhood, which some of you came to my family reunion at my house in Charlottesville, right around the corner from where I live on First Street, there's a row of public housing, and her grandmother lives in that public housing. That's her primary parent. Well, that group of housing is attacked by violent white supremacists in the story. And her and a group of neighbors, along with her white boyfriend, are forced to flee in this little jaunt bus. And they end up taking refuge at Monticello, which is Thomas Jefferson's plantation home. We also went there on the family reunion, if you were there, which is only about 10 minutes drive from my home. So this group of people end up hiding there and then kind of deciding how to react to this violence that's happening in the town below that's growing closer. The twist of the story is Denasia and her grandmother are known descendants of Thomas Jefferson and an enslaved woman with whom the real Thomas Jefferson had children, Sally Hemings. My Monticello was inspired by August 12th in Charlottesville in 2017. I know some of you remember this because I got texts and emails, are you okay, are you okay, are you okay? This was an event that made national news where supposedly in defense of Confederate statues, or with the excuse of the defense of a Confederate statue that the community had talked about taking down, armed groups of white militias and white supremacists came to our town and demonstrated in a way that included Nazi banners, that included firearms in really public spaces, that included putting propaganda in black neighborhoods like the one I live within, and with torches, tiki torches, and so forth. So this made a really big impression on me, and it made me think about what does it mean that these men can come to our town and say ours, and say you shouldn't feel at home here, essentially, in your body and as the person you are. I was a public school teacher at the time, and I had to go to school and see all colors of children, all kinds of children also thinking about that, verbally thinking about that, and dealing with that. It was kind of like a precursor to the storming of the Capitol, if you all think about that. I also wrote the story, I wrote it about a year afterwards. When I actually saw a real descendant of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings in Charlottesville. You know, we live right there, so the families that are descendants of enslaved people, and even of Jefferson's own family and Hemings's family, live in Charlottesville still. So when I saw this woman who looked not so different than me, it made me think of the connection of the violence and the promise of now compared to what we had from the Founding Fathers back in the day. A side note, I drew on South Carolina too for this story, really just in relation to my grandmother. The grandmother in the story, I couldn't figure out a name for her. If any of y'all write stories or make up things, I was just, what can her name be? I played around with all these names, and I ended up naming her Ma Violet. Come to find out, not until maybe 6 months later, I realized I'd named her after my own grandmother, Ma Pansy, purple flower, Ma Violet. Didn't realize I'd done that, but it just sounded right to me. I also did a little shout out to my grandmother in the story because when Ma Violet's sick, Denasia Love sings her favorite hymn, which is Precious Lord, which my grandmother loved. So I had this way of just remembering, right? When you're making something, you get to put all these memories in it. I'm gonna read just the first paragraph of my Monticello. And by the way, when I was studying, I realized that Monticello is Italian for little mountain. My Monticello. We claimed it first, this little mountain. Me and Ma Violet and a scattering of neighbors, all of us fleeing First Street after men came to set our row of 10-roofed homes on fire. The men came at dusk, blaring and operatic, "Oh, say, can you see?" White heads rose up from dusty jeeps, and dark hair thrashed in a harsh new wind like tattered flags. "Ours," the men shouted. Their rifles gleamed as if they'd only just been bought, a megastore militia. Through a hasty breach in Ma Violet's blinds, I even saw a boy among them, blonde and sneering in a pickup window. Men leapt from back seats, sprang out of truck beds, and rushed towards the faces of our homes. White hands clutched metal canisters, swung torches, spilling flames. Bright shouts, the rising haze of smoke, all that and more rousted us out. From our patchy front yards, we saw bodies blur as some of our neighbors rushed forward to try to stop them. We saw a teen struck with the butt of a rifle, his temple spraying red. A toddler flailed, diapered and clinging to its mother's hip as she sank, knees first, to the sidewalk. What we saw in those moments riveted us, and then it set us free. I'm just gonna end there. That's the beginning of their story. I wanted to read this last because in addition to this idea of home, this character really is trying to figure out where her home is. Her home is being destroyed with her grandmother. She's going to Monticello, which is her ancestral home that she feels very fraught about. And also history, right? Is history something that's unspeakable, or is it something we have to reckon with in order to get to the next thing, is a question of the story. There's also this way in which I hope these stories talk about community and the hope that can come from the idea of community. In the novella, Denasia Love and her fellow neighbors survive and resist in a group that is led by women and girls, in a group that centers singing, planting, caring for one another, as well as fighting for their safety. In a group that centers brown and black people, but is welcome to other people of goodwill. The story is called My Monticello because Denasia has to see Monticello as hers, and if not a descendant of a founding father and a slave, if she can't feel at home in that place, then who should? The answer in the story for My Monticello is ours, that it is our Monticello, that the place as a symbol is big enough to contain all these things. Denasia's vision of Monticello and the fantasy and the story of what they create there is closer to Thomas Jefferson's ideals than his lived life as a slave owner was. So we're just about to get to Q&A. Those were the 3 stories I wanted to share. But I just want to end with the best thing about being able to write this book. The best thing about being able to write this book is to share my insides on the outside with readers, and to have an excuse to come here and talk with you all, and also make my parents proud and get my cousins to say they're proud of me. I get to come here and I have an excuse, and so since I'm standing here, I get to share my worries with you. I don't know about you, but for me, the last few years have been particularly harrowing as far as what I see happening in the world. I worry over police brutality, particularly towards brown and black people. I worry about this rise in racist violence. I worry about one party, the Republican Party, undermining the basic tenets of democracy and lying to people and trying to steal elections. I worry about a focus on harming and making whoever is considered the other feel unsafe in their own bodies and in their own identities. And I worry, I'm up at night thinking about this environment, this home of the earth we share, and how we as people are treating it and ignoring things that need to be addressed. But what gives me hope is that maybe that you all worry about some of those things with me. It gives me hope. I hope that like in the novella, we can create connection and community that resist, that shows a different possibility and a different way of being, where we're softened to one another and to people that are considered the other, and we can create connection between us and take care of one another, and that we can take care of this home planet of ours. Alone, I don't think I can do much, but together, I think we can make home, right? We can make this idea of home. So that's my hope. That's all.
Thank you so much, JOCELYN, for sharing some excerpts from my Monticello. We have a few questions that have been created, and then we'll open it up for your questions in the audience. The first question is, when writing my Monticello, what was your established why?
When we had, in August of 2017, when we had, truly, it wasn't just a weekend of people coming with torches. It was kind of a 6-month lead up to that. So we really knew it was like a train coming towards you and you know it's coming. So it was really stressful. I really didn't know how to respond. Some people said, oh, people should go out and counter protest. Some people said people should ignore them. There were all these responses, and the person that I am, I could see wisdom in some of them, and I just wasn't sure what to do. What I did was write the story. It irked me, it bothered me. I felt like bullies had won in this way. A young woman was killed because of it, and all these other people were injured, both very seriously, physically, and also emotionally. So what I did was wrote the story. It was my way of, again, sharing those things that bothered me, collecting all those memories of what happened in a way that I could share them with people and hopefully inspire other people to care about it, think about it, and maybe do something different that can make it so these characters aren't stuck on Monticello with a racist mob below them, right? So that we could create a different outcome.
How much research or interviewing was done about Sally Hemings in preparation for writing the novel?
So the novella has some real history. All the history in the novella is I tried to make it as factual as possible. I really tried to make Monticello, even just the physical plan of it, as real as possible. But I'm not a good historian. I'm not a historian at all. I depended on scholars like Annette Gordon Reeds, who's this really great African-American scholar who wrote The Hemingses of Monticello, among other books, and really brought into the mainstream this idea of Sally Hemings, and not just Sally Hemings, but the whole Hemings family and their relationship to Thomas Jefferson. So I used her. The nice thing about the novel is it takes place now. It's not a historical novel. The world that she lives in is the world that we live in. So I only had to understand Monticello as a person living now. I didn't need to understand it as a person living in those times. And that was really helpful. So I could think about, what are we going to do with it now? If you go to the real Monticello, there's a Jefferson graveyard, which has big wrought iron fence, and it says open to the descendants of the Hemmingses and whatever his wife's last name was. And then down in the parking lot, there's literally a grave, a unmarked area that's marked as a grave site for enslaved people. No names, no headstones, they just know that there are bones there. And so that contrast really struck with me. And so I really used the physical place as a big part of how I researched. I visited a lot.
The characters are so realistic and well developed, and you kind of touched on this. Were any of the characters loosely based on people you met or interviewed, such as Ma Violet, Denasia?
Fiction is great because you get to make it all up, and people often think you're the person in your fiction, and you aren't, but you are, because all you know is yourself, so you're constantly pulling on a detail from someone, the way they put something down, the way that someone said to you 4 years ago that bothered you or was interesting to you. So I'm constantly collecting, and I did use little bits of things. I definitely used our neighborhood, the kinds of people I see, what I noticed, but I didn't base anyone on any other one person. You know, I maybe just took a characteristic of that person and then made up what they did.
Okay, was the intentional conflict Denasia Hemmings' love felt about being at Monticello amplified because of her relationship with Knox and the secret relationship with Devin?
Spoiler, there's a love triangle in the story. Denasia has her boyfriend from college who is white, Knox is with her, but she also has her love from the neighborhood who is black, Devin, and they're two major characters, especially Devin. I thought it was interesting to think about who we love, how we love, about relationships that are intimate between black and white people, and also just about Jefferson's time, right? So he had his wife, Martha Jefferson, living in Monticello. When she dies, he takes on a relationship, which he had all the power with a 14-year-old enslaved woman, Sally Hemings. What does that mean? You know, so I just wanted that to reflect in a modern time in the story with the different relationships with people who live in a different time. And so I did want to kind of just reflect the realities of then, and what does that mean now, and what does it mean between these characters?
All right, and the last question, there was sort of a history repeating itself as Denasia struggled to protect her grandmother and heal the broken places of herself while facing the reality of the broken world. Was that the purpose of the novel?
I definitely think, I wrote this before all the talk of CRT, critical race theory, and this idea of changing the words around slavery to make it less visible, not talking about the unspeakable, protecting children, particularly white children, from the ears from history, from factual history. But it already was kind of in the story, this idea of what I think, which is, I think we can, the history of that is no easier for black people to hear than white people, in my opinion. It's a difficult history, but the way that we're going to get to something different is not going to be to put our hands over our ears, in my opinion, and say that didn't happen, but to reckon with things, to acknowledge them, and to figure out in this moment what we want to do differently and what we can do better and how we can have repair. And so it was really important for me in the story to not have it be a story of vengeance, that these black characters are going to get the white characters and win. They have a better vision for what America should be. They have a different focus than just winning. They have a focus on the idea of restoration, of caring. The women lead this thing because they know what it is to make life. Life isn't just winning the war. What do you have after that? What are you going to do? How are you going to live? What are you going to do? So I really thought about, I think I went far afield of your question, but I really was thinking about that, those things.
All right, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. You can just stand up now and loudly speak your question.
I know you all have a question.
Okay, so after writing this book, did you get a better sense of what your home is? Because in the beginning you were saying that your home is not and then you questioned
I love that question. She was talking about that. I talked about that sense of home, that dual sense of home, that complicated sense of home. Is it different after writing the book? Yes and no. I think the best thing about being an artist of any sort is you can use what's most vulnerable about you as the material for your art. So that idea of like a complicated view of home isn't the most easy. It would be really nice to be like, this is my home, you know, just unequivocally, this is my place. But because I'm not like that, it lets me see into different worlds and be able to notice different things. Sometimes when you're so entrenched in home, you don't even recognize, you take for granted what's normal in your home as what is everyone's normal. And I think I have the ability for some reason to always be like, well, why is that normal? Why are we doing it this way? What does that look like? And that can be a little bit hard as an individual, but I think it really works as an author, so I kind of embrace it a little bit. But I do, you know, I feel a little bit more at home, like in all the places. And I think part of that is just becoming a grown-up, growing up, and becoming a person who just accepts. I'm like, here I am, I hope you like me. My cousins are hugging me, I love it. Go back to Virginia, see my, you know, walk my bad dogs. Whatever it is I'm doing, I just think my body is my home, myself is my home, or trying to find that sense of just peace and ease wherever it is. Of course.
Okay, we have one back there.
So who's going to be in the movie, the Netflix adaptation? Who have you cast so far, out of curiosity? Like what actors?
You would be surprised at how often I get this question. Who is going to be in the movie? So the movie is just going to be the novella. It's being adapted right now into a screenplay. I've met and talked with the person who's writing the screenplay, and with the three women who are the producers. They did the film Hidden Figures. And who's an author that actually lives in Charlottesville, who I got to meet too, she's great. And so, but they haven't gotten to the point of casting yet. So I can't give you names, but I promise you my parents will be calling all of you with those names once they know them. I don't know.
Anyone else?
I got one question. Did you feel like after you wrote this story or this book that it was kind of therapy for you, in a sense, to kind of get it off your chest instead of holding it in?
So was this book kind of therapy? Therapy is not the right word, but there was something cathartic. There was something like a release in just saying your worst fears. Because the book really does go to kind of some of my worst fears for what could happen. And to be fair, a lot of the things that have happened since then have us moving more in the direction of my worst fears as rather than away. When I wrote the book, I thought, this is a cautionary tale, at least my Monticello. This is where we don't want to end up, right? And then a couple years later, before the pandemic, before we had a lot of the pressures, some of the violence that we've seen with guns and so forth. So I was looking at the past and projecting a future that I hoped would not happen. There was something, though, cathartic about it in that like I said at the end of my little talk, like I'm sharing it with you all, so I don't have to, if I'm awake in the middle of the night, I'm like, well, at least I've said what I think, and I've put out there in the world what I think a solution is, which is that we create a different sense of community that can resist this. And that's not an easy task, right? But I think it's an important one. So I feel like a little better rather than just worrying about it and not doing anything, right? To speak it aloud, to write it out, there's something in that that's powerful. Thank you. That's really kind of you. I really appreciate it. again, it was fun when I was thinking about this, about how much of the book was inspired by here, right? You pull on everything when you're writing a book. And I wrote this book over those 5 years from 2015 to 2020. But I've been writing my whole life. If y'all remember as a little kid, I was writing then, I was interested in writing. And then I really seriously started writing a good 20 years ago, where I was trying to get an agent, writing books. And so it really has been this process of work. And my parents work very hard. They're very hardworking people, and so that was helpful to get a model that things don't necessarily come right away. And they might never. I really worked with the sense that who knows what will happen. I'm going to make I'm going to try to make something that I think is interesting and see what happens. I did. I left the novel on a cliffhanger. I love short stories. Short stories often end on a more clip note than a novel. You know, a novel tells you everything, it gives you everything. A short story doesn't. And one thing I always say when people ask about the novella, like, why did I leave it where I left it? I kind of leave, I didn't want, or I felt the urge or the idea to resist the idea that this group of people, this 20-some, mostly black and brown people up on the top of the mountain, lots of women, children, all kinds of things, that they were gonna somehow defeat racism and we were gonna be able to close the book and feel comfortable. I really wanted to leave us with the idea that they were gonna fight and that they were going to use all the resources they had, not just physical violence, but everything that they believed and cared about and thought, to try to resist this movement and to try to create almost like a new way of being that would be better. And I wanted us, the readers, myself included, to be left worrying for them, but also thinking, what can I do to make that reality better, to make this moment better, to protect those people? And so that was really a conscious decision. But yes, I did leave some paternity issues on the table. Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Cousin Eileen. All right, that seems like a really great place to leave it on. If anyone wants me to sign a book, or if there's still books up here, if anyone would like one as a gift or anything, I really, really appreciate you all taking the time and all the hugs and goodwill. And I think my dad has probably a photographic request.
When I look around this room and I see so many family and friends, it's hard to say how proud that we both are, that you have supported us through the years and you're supporting our daughter today. It's never, coming back home is always good, but coming back home after what everybody's been through with the pandemic and everything else, and having this happen really in the middle of the pandemic with a book that, when you write a book like JOCELYN did, you never know whether anybody's going to read it other than the agent you try to give it to. And she's been very successful. But the thing that I like most, or I'm most proud of, and you know, coming from mom and dad, JOCELYN is really a good person. She wrote a good book. She takes care of her family. We've recently moved to be, 5 minutes away from her. But I can say
30 seconds. You're 30 seconds away.
I'm a little slower than you are. But she is honestly a very good person. And that's the thing we're most proud of.
All right, so just a little bit of housekeeping and how this will go. If you are looking to purchase a book, if you could come to my right and line up this way. If you are looking to have your book signed, if you could line up to my left. And we'll go ahead and get that started right now. Thank you so much, JOCELYN, for giving us this opportunity.